screen. Still taking a screen. It doesn't say live on my end.
Well, you're live, Stevie, so stop
Oh,
relaxing and
okay.
get talking.
Well, hello there, and welcome to the Fantasy Fiends podcast. I'm Stevie Collier, your host, and I'm here today with Andy Peliquin, my awesome, beautiful co-host, and I am lounging in my brand new apartment on my couch. I should be using a webcam, but my lovely girlfriend forgot to pack it. She's right here. She's part of the show today, everyone. No, I lost my webcam.
She's part of the show voluntarily or not.
It's definitely involuntary.
That's awesome. So I guess your days have been pretty consumed by this move then.
You know what? I feel bad, but the girlfriend's been doing most of the unpacking because I've been at work trying to pay for this place. So yeah. Oh, well, she actually went to work today. So, but I mean, it's coming. We both don't have a lot of stuff either. So, and I guess we should go ahead and say that we are waiting on our guest author, Joshua. What's his last name?
Josh Rutherford. The Grand Toadmaster.
The Grand Toadmaster.
Stevie, he emailed me the other day. He's like, Josh is a Toastmaster. He's a member of Toastmaster in general. But I read it as Toadmaster. And so now we are going to be calling Josh the Toadmaster all podcast long because that's how we roll.
Josh the Toadmaster. You know, I actually, it's funny, but 2 weeks prior to this, I actually learned about the Toastmasters. So, see, have you ever done anything with the Toastmasters?
I haven't, but I talked with him about it, and he said that it's really helped him to not only be more articulate in the way he talks, but also in his writing. Like, you have to prepare these speeches beforehand, so you really learn to make every word count, and then it translates into making the words you're saying or the words you're writing much more efficient. So it translates to more efficient writing.
Really, I never would have thought about that.
Yeah, me neither, but it was really cool.
I hated all my speech courses. I think I hated them so much. It's like for some reason they just kept throwing them at me. So I feel like I took 4 to 6 speech classes in college, and I guess we could say involuntarily got better at it because I didn't want to do it, but I had to do it. So by the end, I was able to come up with pretty good speeches. Probably not, Toadmaster good or anything, but I would say I'm pretty good at speaking. So definitely improv. So I took improv courses.
I never took speech classes, but I had an English teacher who taught me the love of writing, also taught acting. So I spent a lot of time, learning lines for things like Pilgrim's Progress and the Lewis and Clark story. And so I'm sort of more comfortable talking in public than I would be if I was, just like I had no experience at all, but I have zero public speaking experience.
It's not fun. I'm sure some people think it's fun, but I don't. I picture everybody naked. Hey, so do you have a word of the week?
You know what? I was just thinking about that, and I don't have a word for the week. Do you have one?
I do have one, and I thought of it today. And that word is riveting.
Riveting, nice.
Riveting. I love that word.
Tell us what it means.
It means something is riveting. See, you caught me because I don't have my computer to be looking these things up to give you like these amazing smart definitions. Something that is, let me guess. It's one of those words that you already know what it means, but you can't give it a definition. Okay, so when something is riveting, it is exciting. Would you agree?
The tension holding, literally, it's like rivets that hold two metal plates together. Something that is riveting captures your attention and holds it.
Okay. Would you say it's in a negative context or a positive context, or is it neutral?
No, it's positive.
It's positive. Okay, so I find that riveting. Okay. I wonder, I keep like getting lazy with my hand, and then I look down at my screen and it's just my nose in the video.
man. Too
But
relaxed.
the worst part about moving is I actually haven't had any time to do writing or editing. So today I'd like to get a good 5,000 words edited.
That's good. I've been blasting through this urban fantasy story. I've been putting out about 1,500 to 2,000 words a day, which is terrible for a novel. But I always have a really hard time with short stories. Like I can usually only get a few hundred words in, 500 to 1,000. But this particular short story that I'm writing, I'm just flying through it. I started on Friday, and I am at I think 12,000 or 14,000 words, and I should have it all done tomorrow.
So wait, you said how many words a day on this short story?
About 1,500 to 2,000.
And you said that's bad for a novel?
Like in my novels, I'll usually get 2,000 to 2,500 words a day easy,
Oh,
sometimes
okay.
up to 3 or 4, depending on the length of the chapter.
Yeah, I got you. Okay. Yeah, I knew you had trouble with short stories for some reason. But yeah, that sounds good, man. And what was that book cover you posted on Facebook?
The Different Not Damaged, that is um, a short story collection that I will be releasing in October 27th. It's actually my older brother's birthday. And it's all short stories set in the world of the Hunter, and it's actually the city of Veramis from the last few Solaris series. And the Hunter or someone from the books shows up in each of the stories in a minor character sort of way. But it's all like different disorders. There's PTSD and autism, fibromyalgia, things like that. So short stories using these disabilities sort of as abilities in this fantasy context.
And you wrote them all.
Yeah.
Man, I have to say that's my favorite book cover you've done so far.
That's awesome.
Who did it?
I like covers by Christian. He did a really good job on that one.
Man, you need to send me his link. So have you heard anything from Josh?
Yeah, I've been chatting him. He's having some technical difficulties, but he'll be popping on soon enough.
Okay. Do you want to start covering the theme then for this week, or do you want to wait?
I wanted to wait because he's definitely a very articulate man, and this is a topic that he's very familiar with. I read his book when it first came out, Sons of Chenia, and it felt like a fantasy Leo Tolstoy. Like it was just that rich, flowing, deep language that reminded me of War and Peace or any of those Tolstoy stories. And so it was such a great read. It's this doorstop of a book. I think it was like 160, 190,000 words. It was quite a read, but it was a very well developed story. And it's sort of like set in a Russia-esque fantasy world, Eastern Europe, with sort of it had a flavor of like the Jews living in different communities around the world, but it's fantasy, so obviously alternate universe, but really well done.
And it's his first book.
Yeah, that was his first book. He just released another one, and I haven't yet read it. I think it's a novella or short story. I think it's next on my reading list, but I haven't gotten around to reading it because reading is not really taking my time these days.
Yeah, I mean, I barely have any time to read. It's all done through Audible now for me. So.
Oh yeah, yeah. I may sound like a little bit of a heathen, but I am just listening to Aragon for the first time.
Yeah, aren't you done with that yet?
Not yet. I only get about an hour, half an hour to an hour every day to listen to the books.
At the gym?
Yeah, at the gym.
Yeah.
So it takes me a while. It takes me a few months to get through a book. So the book's been okay. It hasn't been, oh my God, this is the greatest fantasy thing ever. It definitely has a lot of flavor of Lord of the Rings with Dragonlance sort of ripped off.
Yeah. It's what's more awesome about it was how young he was when he wrote it.
Yeah.
Wasn't he like 16?
Yeah, something like that. Super young.
So, and I hear like he did like guerrilla marketing for this thing. So he actually dressed up as a knight and went to all these schools talking about Aragon.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, isn't that awesome? So he was like one of my like heroes when I was like 12, and I was like, oh, I can write a book. And I actually just found my book that I wrote when I was 12. Pretty good size, like 20,000 words for a 12-year-old. I was shocked. Like I thought, thinking back, I was like, oh, it's probably like 2,000 words. And it was like 20,000 words. Horrible, god awful. It was the worst thing I've ever read. It was embarrassing. So one day someone will be able to come back to this when I'm a famous author, and they're like, oh, Stevie wrote a horrible book about dinosaurs and going back in time. And like I was a big family guy, so like my grandma's in it, my grandpa's in it, my mom and dad are in it. Oh, it's so bad. It's so cringeworthy. And like we go back in time to fight dinosaurs or save dinosaurs. I couldn't get past 200 something words. It was horrible.
Yeah,
But
the first thing I ever wrote was this god awful story as well called Tally the Tiger Master. Basically, a guy who gets his head, he's got a tiger act, tiger trainer, and he gets his head almost bitten off, and so whole thing total nonsense. I think I wrote it and it was total rubbish. Thank God I can't find it again. And I started at the age of 15. I started this Jason Bourne meets James Bond meets Jack Reacher meets every testosterone fueled action movie ever. And it was like martial arts and snowmobiles and guns and just everything that every 15-year-old boy loves. And I think I got like 6 chapters into it, and I think it was like 6 to 12,000 words. It was actually pretty good, like you said.
yeah, it is good.
And then I looked at it and I was like, no, this is just rubbish, and deleted it.
Rubbish.
Yeah.
Hey, is Jack Reacher a book?
I'm pretty sure Jack Reacher was a book before it was anything else.
Okay, because I watched the movie and I thought it was okay. Um, but now, currently I am listening to The Land, a lit RPG. I'm kind of, studying that market a little bit since that book's ready to go. Like all I need to do is send that one to an editor. And
Nice.
yeah, I had my brother read it and he really liked it, but there's some things I need to change on it. So, and this next book I'm going to start writing, it's going to be my first plotted book.
Nice.
Yes, and I'm a little bit nervous. I read the book Take Your Pants Off. So it's a book for pantsers learning to plot.
That's not the Take Your Pants Off book that I read.
Uh-oh.
That I bought
Uh-oh.
from the steamy romance section on Amazon.
Are you gonna send that to me in my new apartment so I can read it out loud?
Yeah. Oh, that's the weirdest thing is reading like erotica or those romance novel sex scenes out loud. I don't know if you've ever tried to do it, but it's so
No.
it's like the most cringeworthy thing ever.
What is the worst what is like the most horrible erotica you've ever read that you will admit to? I've never read one, so I don't know how bad they get.
There's some decent. I mean, my limited experience with erotica was like Danielle Steele or that sort of authors. Like my sisters had a bunch of those books, and I was the kind of reader who read everything, especially the stuff that I wasn't supposed to read. My sister didn't want me to read her books, so I would steal them and read them. And my 15-year-old mind went to town with these amazing stories, but I don't think I've ever read anything super cringeworthy. I mean, I've always wanted to read the dinosaur erotica novels that have been published on Amazon in the last couple of years. They just look so ridiculous that I have to read them. But
Wait, the dinosaur what?
Dinosaur erotica. Oh yeah.
About real dinosaurs.
Yeah. I'm going to give you some examples right now.
No.
Taken by the T-Rex. Or ravished by the Triceratops, unicorn horn of desire, in the Velociraptor's nest. Like this is like
what?
Like erotica written about dinosaurs and other magical creatures. It is the most ridiculous sounding thing ever, which is what makes it so absolutely hilarious.
No way. I really hope the person who wrote that wasn't serious at all.
Dude, the Taken by the T-Rex, I'm looking at it now, it's sitting in the 45,000th place on Amazon Kindle. Like they're still selling 5 books a day or something.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, like, it blew me away that someone would actually put something out there. Like, it's awesome that they can do something ridiculously silly like that and get away with it. Makes me wish I could do something like that.
Well, the Fantasy Fiends podcast is really taking a turn today.
I know.
This is
This
what
is what
happens
happens
when
when we don't have guests.
we talk about dinosaur erotica. You know what though?
Which
Like,
really, every podcast should talk about dinosaur erotica. It's really an important part of literature.
yeah, it really makes you happy to be American and alive. So,
One of those white people products.
white people products. You know, I feel so bad for Josh. I mean, I bet he is panicking right now.
Yeah. I mean, I've been staying in touch with him over a messenger because he's having some technical difficulties. Google is a little bit complicated sometimes, so he's having
Yeah.
some trouble getting in.
Well, does he have an iPhone?
I have absolutely no idea.
Because you might want to ask him. That was like when I got home from the gym. I'm like, wait a minute, where is my webcam? Because I have my whole setup, done over here, and no webcam. So,
Yeah.
oh man, I was like, oh, that's I if there's one thing that puts me in a bad mood, it's wasting other people's time.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, like I feel like a total dirtbag. So whenever I'm rushing to go do something, that's what will put me in a bad mood.
Growing up in Japan, they taught me that early means 15 minutes early, late is on time.
Wow, total opposite Mexico.
Yeah, totally. Today, the guy that I was going to go running with, he told me, I'll meet you at the gym at 10 o'clock because I was at the gym at 10 o'clock, and he texted me, I'm going to be there at 10:15. And like 10:20, he shows up.
You're going to go jogging with him on the treadmill?
No, we went running on the beach. Ran a 5K on the beach today.
Oh, dang, Andy. You go get it.
Yeah.
Nice. There's no way I'd do that.
I really try hard to at least keep up with the whole fitness thing. Like as your book, what was the book? Fitness for
Six Pack for
Writers?
Geeks.
Six Pack for Geeks. It's when you have such a sedentary lifestyle like we do, where everything revolves around sitting on the computer and writing. You've really got you're at a huge disadvantage when it comes to fitness. So even just the 30 minutes to an hour I can get at the gym, it's like going from -2 to a 0 just to sort of break even on the whole health scale. So I live a long and healthy life.
It's dangerous, being sedentary for so long. So
yeah,
and it can get addictive too. So luckily, I've been working out since I was 15, and I can't. It's like an ingrained habit deep in my brain. Man, my phone's already almost dead. I'm gonna have to get off my couch. Well, I feel bad for this Josh guy. We might have to reschedule him.
No, he should be figuring it out. He said he's trying his tablet. Hopefully that'll work.
Okay. And are we keeping the theme today secret?
No. Okay, so the theme for today is leadership. Now, leadership is actually something that appears, I will hazard, in literally every single fantasy novel in some way, and very possibly in every novel in some way. I will give you an example from, like an unlikely example from my book, the Fiends series. The character Alana, she starts out as an 8-year-old girl at the beginning, and by the beginning of the second book, she's running her own crew of thieves. Now, how would a 5'3" girl be able to boss around guys who are, literally 6.5 feet tall, like my size? And it's definitely not because of physical presence or anything like that. So it's all these, these subtle traits of leadership. There's intelligence that can make someone a leader. When you're the smartest person in the room, people naturally gravitate towards listening to what you say. There's confidence. Confidence is something that alpha males have. You just instinctively dominate whatever room you're in without being aggressive, without being forceful. You're just comfortable in your surroundings, and people respond to that subconsciously. So that's a trait of leadership. And then of course there are traits like courage, bravery, things like that people respond to. You always read about the heroes in the fantasy novel who charges the enemy alone and saves the day because all the soldiers charge along behind. There's a lot of those leadership traits that everybody is very familiar with. But then it's also a really, can be really subtle things too. That you don't always think about. I'm watching Game of Thrones, and I won't spoil anything for anybody.
Yeah,
who
please.
hasn't. One of the characters talking about Jon Snow in the latest scene, he said, all these hard men of the Night's Watch, they voted to give him a certain amount of power, and then again, other people, more people voted to give him more power. He didn't ask to do it, but he was chosen. So that humility, in a way, Jon Snow never tried to be the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. He never tried to be anything. But because of just the way he was, the way he acted, the things he did, sort of his innate nobility, people chose him. They gravitated toward him to be a good leader.
Would you say that every protagonist is a leader?
I think in a certain way, yeah, because leadership basically means convincing people to follow you or to do what you want them to do without having to threaten, coerce, bribe, using any of those negative reinforcements. So basically, anybody who can say, "Hey, let's do this. I want to do something. Help me achieve my goal." That's a leader in a certain aspect. So, just some light Googling led me to hundreds of articles on what it takes, on signs of a good leader. Things like people who lead when the need arises. That's a really common theme in fantasy. The Dark Lord is about to take over the world, and an unlikely hero arises. Or literally every fantasy story ever, epic fantasy, mind you, is about that, someone sort of stepping up when needed.
Yeah, definitely a huge. I mean, in the Four Territories, my protagonist is a huge leader, and he takes on these roles without really knowing it, and he's definitely not the best leader, and you can tell, but he's learning. And I told you I was reading that book, Take Off Your Pants, and it came up with something really. They said something that was really cool, and it reminded me of the Four Territories, and that is, Esh is a leader, but he's not a very good one. He leaves the book at a better position as a leader than he did when he started, but he's nowhere near getting to that leadership role that he wants to be at. And they explain that's how Harry Potter is. He doesn't become a hero in book 1. He becomes a hero in book, 6?
Not even really. He never really becomes a hero until sort of the end, until after, spoiler alert, he defeats Voldemort.
What?
By now, if you don't know that Harry Potter defeats Lord Voldemort, you deserve to have the book spoiled.
And you've been living under a rock.
The largest of rocks.
Yeah. Hey, can you hear me well?
Yeah, I can hear
you. Is it bad without the headphones?
No, it's fine. Name any fantasy book. Any fantasy book, or one that I've read.
Dinosaurs Erotica.
Dinosaur Erotica. There you go. The Triceratops that takes her has leadership abilities. Now, okay, Lord of the Rings, classic fantasy novel. To a certain extent, Frodo has some leadership abilities, but then at the same time, Sam does as well, because Sam and Frodo, they both, they convince Gollum to take them, and of course they use the offer of the ring, but then they do try to reach him. They try to go the route of, well, let's try to reach this character and bring him back from the sort of the monstrous character that he's become. And that's a sign of leadership, is trying to reach out to people and lift them up instead of using them as a stepping stool. It's sort of a rising tide lifts all ships sort of mentality, that everybody can rise instead of just me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's cool that we're talking about leadership today, because I was pitching ideas in my head for, you know, once I send out the 4 territories and the lit RPG, the Lionheart, to an editor. I really don't want to write the sequels to those yet, but I have this idea for a drug lord in a fantasy world, and he takes this evil leadership role. So it, I like the idea because in my head, leaders are usually, you know, positive. You know, they have the band behind them. They go and fight goblins and they save the princess. That's a leader, right? Well, what about the leader of of a bad cause? You know, one that is not bringing good to the world. So it's still a leader, and I don't know. I wanted to do something like that. Something. It's not original, but it sounds like it'd be a lot of fun to write about.
If you can make it work, like make this drug lord sympathetic. I've actually thought of something similar, and you know, other than I haven't figured out the story, but it would be a really interesting thing about how to make a character like this sympathetic
So
enough
he still
that people
has.
will read it.
Does he still have to be sympathetic to the reader?
Absolutely.
Okay, still.
You can't really get away with a character that's non-sympathetic unless you're really, really, really good.
And you,
And I don't consider myself that good yet.
my girlfriend just said Professor Snape.
Yeah, sure, but see, the book doesn't revolve around Professor Snape. Professor Snape is an antagonist throughout the book.
What else was I going to say? Oh, and I read that whenever you want to make somebody sympathetic to the reader, you want the reader to be sympathetic to a character, you introduce a flaw.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So our leaders have to be flawed.
The flaws are basically just showcasing that they're human, because there's no such thing as a perfect leader. No one is ever going to be great at everything. So the flaws say, look, no matter how awesome this guy is, he's still human because he screws up at something else. And that's sort of a way of balancing it out so you don't have these completely unreal characters.
So let me ask you this. How is the hunter a leader?
You know, I don't know if he is a leader. I think, in a way, his leadership trait would be his desire to protect those sort of under his command. Like if he was to lead a group of people, he would be the first one to charge into battle to protect them, instead of saying, well, you know, you go fight for me and you know, go and die. The fact that he's basically immortal definitely gives him sort of a, you know, a way to say, well, yeah, try and, you know, I'm going to charge into battle, no problem. But he's definitely not the sort of person who would lead from the, you know, direct from the rear. He would lead from the front. And if he were to become a leader, I think that would be his thing.
Couldn't he be a leader just by protecting the slums? You know, his choice people that he protects in Boramis.
You know, he would. I mean, you know, he does see himself sort of as a protector, but that's not the same as a leader. You know, a protector can sort of be a silent guardian that doesn't really get, you know, doesn't have any direct contact, that can be alone. Yeah. Whereas a leader is someone who actually leads, who, you know, takes people along with him. And there will be a little bit of that development in his character in the end, because of what happens in the last book. I'm not going to spoil anything, but there will be certain leadership characteristics that he has to develop in order to achieve his mission. And there will be those, you know, those leadership qualities that make other people want to follow him. And that really is the thing that makes a leader good, is even just one or two qualities that other people want to follow, whether it's you know, they see people who are breaking the rules to do something better or to improve. You know, they speak out against perceived injustices, or they say, you know, this is wrong. This rule that you're imposing on me is wrong, so I'm going to try to change it. You know, they're iconoclasts, as they're called, idol smashers. Or they work with people to achieve a common goal, instead of saying, well, I can do this all myself and join me for the ride, but let's all do this together.
And how is everything going with Josh right now?
He is figuring it out. He was having some problems with it, and it's still not working.
It's still not working?
Yeah. We're having fun talking, and if nothing else, we can read his story for him, and he can come on. We can always stretch out the podcast a little bit. YouTube has an 8-hour limit, so if we go over a little bit, who cares?
Yeah. Yeah, because I feel bad.
You know what? One thing that I found hilarious, or I found entertaining, is the signs that you're a bad leader. Like, in addition to looking for things that make people good leaders, I actually looked at things that made them bad leaders, and it was really fun, because you can sort of go the opposite direction. Your antagonist is a shitty leader because of these traits, and that's the only thing that, even though he or she is more capable than your protagonist, these traits disqualify them as a leader, and thus your protagonist saves the day or whatever.
So, what were the traits that make you a bad leader?
A lack of empathy and compassion, people who are afraid of change.
Really, that one? Afraid of change?
Well, if you think about it, I mean, look at the church and their treatment of Galileo. That right there, Galileo said, "Hey, the Earth revolves around the sun, and the sun is the center of the universe of our whatever." And the church was like, "Hell no." And so that sort of being afraid of change stops growth and improvement. It just keeps things consistent, and nothing ever gets accomplished through that flat line.
Yeah. Well, speaking of being scared of change, so let's talk about Bilbo.
Okay.
Yeah.
Talk about him.
he was scared of change. So he definitely was in for a surprise when his hobbit hole was turned upside down. And does that make him a good leader, that he actually overcame this fear? And he does it on his own. He's sitting in his little hobbit hole, and he's like, you know what, I'm gonna go after those guys.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Bilbo Baggins is never the visible leader, and yet at the same time, because of him, the whole book, the whole adventure succeeds. It's because of him that they get to Mithril Hall. It's because of him that they can actually slay the dragon and find the treasure and win the battle against the five armies, or the orcs.
So he's the protagonist, right? But he's not the leader.
No, well, that's the thing, is the apparent leader isn't always the one who wins the day, or who succeeds the most. Like, the apparent leader was Thorin Oakenshield, the big bad dwarf who was the king under the mountain. He was the leader. He was supposed to be the leader, and yet he took things so away from when he was coveting the dragon's hoard and searching for the Arkenstone. He actually took things way off course and started the war between the humans and elves and the dwarves. Like, had Thorin remained in charge, the story would have ended totally differently. But because of Bilbo Baggins, the actions that he took, he stole the Arkenstone, slips out of the mountain, and goes to the humans and says, "Here, take this." That action right there, he's not afraid of the consequences. That definitely will happen when Thorin finds out his betrayal. But he did it for the right reasons, and that right there is a massive sign of a leader, is that they're willing to do the right thing no matter the cost.
So he becomes a leader by the end of the story.
Exactly, and yet he's never the de facto or visible leader. He is just someone that people say that, like, when you stop to think about it, he exhibits all these leadership traits.
Did you know, like, I read halfway through The Hobbit and I had to put it down because I got bored.
Heathen.
I know.
Well, or referring to our word from a few weeks ago, Philistine.
Philistine, yeah. I definitely feel like one, but I got to the part where he gets knocked out and, the battle rages around him. I don't know. I just felt, I don't want to say a cop-out because it's so realistic. Like, of course that's what's going to happen with Bilbo. He gets knocked out because he's a good warrior. I just got bored at that point. But, I better change the subject before our fans kill me.
like I'm finding the same thing with Aragon is that he's been knocked out like 5 times
Yeah,
throughout the story. And
it's annoying.
I'm okay with the knockout or two when it serves a purpose, but it happened a few too many times, so it's a little bit irksome.
It stops the story.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Or it's like, well, dude, figure shit out so you don't get knocked out again. Or even think to the author, find a better way to do that.
Now that you say that, I'm wondering if I knocked out S too many times. Now
Yeah.
I'm scared. Well, he gets knocked out in a few ways. He never gets knocked out by a weapon. He gets knocked out by he has to go through some trials. Whenever he gets taken over by an evil spirit, it kind of changes him. So his mentality changes, and I guess you might be able to call that a knockout, but not in the sense we're talking about. So I feel a little bit better. I had something to. It'll come back to me, but it was. I want to say thank you to all of our subscribers because we have hit 50 subscribers, and that is
yes.
more. What?
I said, "Ooh, yes."
Yes. I wanted to hear everyone here at the Fantasy Fiends podcast wants to thank everybody out there for liking and subscribing our videos. That really helps us out. We are growing slowly but steadily, and it's more subscribers than Andy and I have on our own. So,
well, no, I just hit 50 as well. So now we gotta step up our game, Stevie.
I'm gonna make a Google account and go subscribe to us.
Very good. Yeah, that's not gaming the system at all.
No, not at all. But yeah, I wanted to say that. That's not what I wanted to say though. And it's probably have you watched Castlevania?
I have not.
Okay. Would you say? Well, I want to say it's fantasy. It is in a rural area with the Catholic Church, but it's not really the Catholic Church. They never say they're Catholic, but you can tell they have the bishops and the Pope and stuff like that. And they about this the last male to some family, but he kills vampires and monsters, and it's so good. The animation. There's only 4 episodes per season, and they're 20 minutes long, so they spend a lot of time on the animation.
Okay.
If that makes sense. You got to go watch it. It's on Netflix.
Okay. Yeah,
so it's Netflix.
It's horror, not because it's classic monsters like Dracula and Frankenstein and werewolves and things like that. So it falls into horror.
But it has magic.
Yeah, but it still counts as horror because of those classic horror monsters.
Then how come paranormal fantasy can have vampires and stuff?
Because it's not it's different takes on these classic monsters. Like instead of Dracula is the original horror, basically. Bram Stoker, Frankenstein, Mary Shelley, all of these classic horror monsters. They're horror. Now you can get away making your own sort of paranormal versions of vampires, but vampires are traditionally horror. So if you're going to stick with the classic vampire and right style, that is horror.
Let me ask you this: why did you write a female protagonist?
Because females are awesome. No, I felt like there's not enough awesome women in literature. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I've been listening to fantasy books, reading fantasy books for 20 years now, and I can name great female main characters, maybe 5 of them, 10 at most. Most of the female main characters, they're done poorly, or there's not even the main character. It's usually a man and a woman that are together, but there's very few female-driven stories.
And how do you think you did being writing about a female?
I mean, I did a lot of research into every aspect of the female's life as much as any man could. Whether it's the interactions with other men after the things that she was through, interactions with other women, their way of thinking in these different situations. But then also, I sort of approached it from the nurture instead of nature. Like people are people at the beginning. psyches are very similar when at birth. And then through the people that they encounter, their experiences, the male psyche tends to develop differently from the female psyche. So if there is no female role models in a society like the Night Guild, there would be no emphasis placed on developing these feminine traits. That was sort of my way of thinking, and it's a very controversial thing, whether nature versus nurture controls. But because she's surrounded by men during her formative years, a lot of the things that are traditionally feminine, like in the medieval times, the conservation of one's virginity, virginity is sort of as something important, was very emphasized, but it was the women in the family who emphasized that, and the men in the family, they did other stuff. So without these women role models in her life, she would have developed very similarly to the other male people around her. So that was sort of the approach that I took with this character, and giving her enough depth as a person to make her relatable to both men and women, that they can immediately see, okay, this is a woman who is in this situation, without thinking, oh, that's something that I would never do as a woman, or that's something I would never do as a man. Just sort of make it a character that's relatable to both. And from the responses that I've gotten so far, I hope that I've done it right.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, that seems something like I wouldn't tackle for a while personally, because I want to get better with my craft first. So, but you never know. And what about Mistweaver by Brandon Sanderson? Isn't that a female protagonist? Mistborn, yeah.
Yeah, that is a good one and not a good one. Like, I will say this: Brandon Sanderson's worlds are peerless. His magic system with the metals, the society, like everything about the Mistborn series is very well done, except the female character, in my opinion.
Really?
He focuses a lot on things that are traditionally emphasized by female authors. I don't know if there's jealousy or insecurity or traits like that I personally found not off-putting, but it made the character less relevant to me as a man, or as a male reader. If I wanted to read a woman, I don't know if you've ever read, I think it's Elizabeth Moon's Paxenarian series.
No.
It is by far the best female fantasy led novel series that I've read, and I thought about what she did in order to write the character of Alana, because it was so well done. There were the typical female trials that she encountered, and yet it wasn't like she was a woman. She was a soldier. That was her whole thing, was that she was a woman dressed up as a soldier, training to become a soldier, ultimately becomes a knight. And she's a woman, so she's facing sort of the discrimination and the bias that is so common in a medieval era world against women.
See, I noticed whenever we read your passage that one Tuesday for your release, your character takes a pretty big leadership role in figuring out a way to get into the lock, the safe. I mean,
absolutely, and that's what I was saying. Her confidence is what makes her so successful as a leader. Is that no matter who she's with, she's not going to back down from a confrontation, which is actually a ton of fun to write, because she has awesome confrontations with the people in the Night Guild. But then she's developed confidence over, because of her successes as a thief, she's developed this ability to hold her head high, and that attracts people to her. At the beginning, there were characters who sort of saw her as a little sister, someone to protect. And so she had to break out of that relationship, that dynamic, in order to take a leadership role. And so it was an interesting challenge to do, because you've got these characters that people absolutely love, because they see, there's this little girl and these guys are protecting her. But then at the same time, you don't want to have that protective male scenario in a book that's a very female driven story. So it was an interesting thing to figure out. I'm not going to spoil how I figured it out, but I've gotten a lot of hate mail, the good kind, about it.
Really?
Yeah.
So from what I got from the passage was that she was just really good at what she did, and that's what made her, people wanting to come to her and actually listen to her.
Yeah, exactly. Not only is she first off, she started out by being successful in something that was impossible, considered impossible, right? The thing she did in book 1 was considered impossible, and she succeeded because of her small size. Like, that was one way of turning sort of her disability into an ability. She's smaller than all the men around her, and that makes her succeed where all the others have failed. And then, so because of her success, she's built this reputation. And because of other actions that she takes,
hey, Josh,
did you make it, Josh?
I guess I did.
Hooray!
Awesome. Okay. So, yeah. Oh, wow.
Welcome.
Yeah. Hey, Stevie. Hey,
Hey,
Andy.
Josh.
Sorry to be joining late in the game. I guess it was something with the browser, so I had to download a bunch of stuff, and here we go. Yeah. So the power of Google, right?
Yeah, exactly. Google's
Wow.
changing the world, taking over the world. We've been talking about the leadership thing. I think we covered a lot of it, but I was talking about the Sons of Chenya, the only book guilty of Yours that I've read so far. I've still got Ashes on my reading list. It's like 1 or 2 books down, but Sons of Chenya, I really enjoyed. Why don't you tell our viewers, listeners about it?
Oh, sure, of course, yeah. And Andy, just for the benefit of you and Stevie, you can hear me okay and see me okay?
Oh, we can hear you. You have no camera.
Oh, goodness. Oh, okay. Let's see if...
Should be top right of your screen.
Yeah, okay. Let's...
What country are you in that picture?
There we go. There we go. All right, there we go.
Hooray!
I'm not here in the U.S.
Hey, what's
There
up?
we are. Whoa. Okay. Yeah, like I said, the power of Google.
Very nice. Yep, we can see you.
Okay. All right, yeah. So I'm coming into this late in the game, but yes, Sons of Chania. It is a fantasy novel, and it's an epic fantasy about 5 refugees who return to their homeland. And it centers around a protagonist with supernatural abilities. And then, of course, there's a number of other supporting characters, including the antagonist. And I know that in discussing with you, Stevie, and Andy, that the topic of leadership is very central to a lot of fantasy novels, including mine. Yeah, so.
Tell us a little bit how leadership plays in yours.
Oh, well, leadership, it plays in mine in a number of different ways. Now, the main character, the protagonist, Nikolai, he is one of those reluctant leaders. Think kind of Bilbo Baggins from Lord of the Rings. He's the type of protagonist that, for more or less, is involved in a series of events that are largely beyond his control. So he's the reluctant leader, so to speak. Now, he does have supernatural abilities, as I said, but he is very wary of using them. And he's also very conscious of the fact that his people have been through something horrible, something very debilitating before, and he's very, I would say, hesitant about going down that path again, not only for his own needs, because he knows he could be hurt in the process, but also because of what it's done to his people. So he's that reluctant leader. Yeah. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we have a megalomaniac. We have Stalgrov, and he's the premier of the enemy, Zarya. So as I've told people, he's a combination of, say, Putin and Stalin. Unapologetic, just badass leader who just is willing to plow down everybody, whether it be his own countrymen and especially his enemies, to get what he wants. So, yeah.
He's the wrong kind of leader. He's one of those bad leadership traits that we were talking about.
He is, yeah. And it's funny, actually, on the way home from work today, I was listening to NPR, and they were talking about how democracy nowadays seems to be shifting from these liberal, very open democracies to these more authoritarian ruling parties. I mean, you can look at Duterte in the Philippines. You can look at what's currently going on in Turkey. About a year ago, when they cracked down on all these businesses, all these opposition leaders after a failed coup. And you can even see that in our own country, how there's this kind of shift and really polarization from kind of this middle path that was working so well for a little while, and then how we've, depending on what side of the political spectrum you're on, we've kind of deviated and gone from either far right to far left. So, yeah.
Very true. You know, actually, I read something interesting today about, or I saw the article headline that says Trump's presidency is going to ultimately make for more informed voters. Because once people, when people see, okay, this is what happens when I don't vote, when I don't know anything about the issues, all of that. You know, I have no political stance, but just seeing all the stuff that's going on, it's like, wow, I can't. You know, it's hard to believe this is happening. As a Canadian, you know, I'm obviously in safe from everything. But you know, if in a way, if getting through Trump means that people take more of an active role in politics and shaping the country, ultimately it could benefit the world. You know, a bad leader could lead to better leaders down the line.
Mm-hmm.
Right, yeah. And you see that in fantasy as well. Certainly, and you probably feel this way about your own works, and I feel this way about mine. You almost need a strong antagonist, a strong leader with bad qualities or a bad agenda, in order to make a good leader. You know, a hero, a really strong protagonist. I mean, it's hard to have a strong protagonist unless they're really fighting against something. And that's all the more true in fantasy, even nowadays in our current political spectrum. So, yeah.
Yeah, I actually just read that in a craft book, that if you want to show off how good your protagonist is, you have to have a really bad antagonist to show that.
Yeah.
So, like, they use some kind of weird example, like you wouldn't know how cold a room is unless you touch something hot or something weird like that. I didn't like the example, but I totally knew where they were coming from, and this is just like you said, and it makes me want to go back to my own work because well, it's one of the reasons why I really want to start plotting over pantsing, so I can actually write stuff like that in. And now that I go back and look at some of my older work, I wish I would have made my antagonist. I wish I would have given him more of an agenda, and I'm actually going to have to go back and write in a stronger agenda for this guy. Actually, one of my beta readers said, you know, we don't know a whole lot about this antagonist. Why does he want this power? So I definitely have to go back and write that in.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And I think that's one of the caveats of leadership in fantasy. I mean, it seems less authentic if you have a leader, whether they're the good leader or the bad leader, if they don't have the proper motivation for what they're doing. I mean, for all the leadership deficiencies that we have in our current political climate, we do know what motivates these leaders that, you know, maybe history will prove to be detestable. You know, leaders that are possibly out to make $1 billion, or, you know, hundreds of billions of dollars, or leaders who are genuinely concerned about the threat of extremism or terrorism, or leaders who want to go back to this nostalgia of values that maybe never really existed and are willing to sell that at all costs to their voters or their constituents. In fantasy, you know, leaders have no less of that responsibility to be authentic in their motivations. I mean, you can have a bad leader who's just evil and, you know, who somehow commands an army of thousands or millions, or to make it more understandable, we could have a bad leader who is able to strike fear in the hearts of his people because he created an enemy, while this enemy may have just been someone who, or a people that were just minding their own business and happened to be sitting on, let's say, a cache of resources, you know, a mountain of gold, so to speak, as, you know, is the case with Sons of Chania. I mean, the people, the Chileans, they were sitting on this rich natural resource. So over a number of years and decades, the antagonist, Zarya, made them look to be the bad guy, but ultimately it was their greed, their ambitions that led them to really demonize a people just because they happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely see how that, a lot of conspiracy theorists have said, well, that's exactly why, there was both Gulf Wars, or why, Afghanistan and all the stuff that's gone on in Africa, or Iran, all that stuff. You've got people who do these things for a reason, and maybe it's a reason that many people even agree with. Trump didn't get elected because he was an ass. He got elected because he talked people into voting for him. So when bad leaders are, bad leaders can still be good leaders. They can still have enough of those good qualities to make people, want to follow them. But then what they do with that leadership ability when it's bad, that almost makes them worse than someone who's just a shitty leader. Like, the captain of the military who sends his men to die because sends them into an ambush because he's an idiot. Those are the kind of characters that are very easy to hate. But then there's the benevolent dictator who has said, hey, let's do something, let's make something with the country, and he's got the whole populace behind him. And then what he does is, genocide, or he does, horrible things for the sake of his country, because people see, oh, he's a leader who's getting what we want. He's a good leader. They're willing to follow a leader who is essentially bad.
Right. Yeah. I mean, just because a leader is evil or bad doesn't mean they are lacking in charisma or they're lacking in their powers of persuasion. If anything, they have those abilities to the exponential power. And it's crazy to see how people follow leaders that are good at leading, regardless of where it takes them. Yeah.
Wake up, sheeple!
When you wrote,
yeah,
was that one of your agendas when you were writing it? You wanted that to be one of your central themes?
For leadership,
or is that
yes.
just an idea you had for the podcast?
Actually, no. Well, that was definitely at the forefront of me writing, not so much the protagonist, but the antagonist. Sons of Shania, it's a kind of a fantasy take on Tsarist Russia. And I was very interested in kind of that period where you had monarchy existing at the birth of democracy. So you did have societies that were governing themselves, in councils and assembly, but you also had these autocrats that were really driving home the point that they needed to hang on to power. So in creating, in my story, it happened to be a premier, much like a prime minister or a president that has no election term limits. And I created this character who was willing to hold on to his power and actually not only hold on to it, but to grow it, to increase it at any cost. And he did that through a lot of manipulation, through policies of fear, which I think we're all very conscious of in today's political climate. But that was just something that, at least for the antagonist, I was very conscious of when I was creating that character. And then also how his behavior affected the secondary characters on the antagonist side.
And your other book, Ashes, that's not fantasy, is it? Or is it fantasy?
No, Ashes is actually a science fiction, but it is dystopian. And what that involves is a general, or a commanding officer who, and it takes place in the United States after the Civil War, or you could say a second Civil War, has wreaked havoc. So, I mean, the West is split up into its own confederation, as is the Northeast and the Midwest in different sections. So we're looking at a leader who is so tired of war and conflict that he actually considers going over to the other side. And the other side actually is led by peace activism. So where we see leadership in Sons of Shania driven by, say, militarism, or by a hard stance, or by the might is right mantra, in Ashes, we see someone who's willing to take up the cause of peace and be a pacifist in his actions. So, yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Well, Andy,
Yeah.
what do you think about us doing the reading?
Yeah, let's get into that because it's already 6:30, so we're going over. Josh, do we need to do any accents for these voices?
Let's see. I don't think there's any accents per se. Depends on how comfortable you are with your Russian. I cannot do a Russian
Not very well.
accent. Yeah. So I think really, if you want to drive home the point, this excerpt, this section, is all about kind of this crescendo. It starts off very, I guess you could say, very subtle. You know, it's just a very loose conversation, very open conversation about a battle gone wrong. And then it really builds up to a confrontation where a leader has to really rein in his general, his leading general, no less. So I guess just maybe keep that in mind.
Awesome. So I get to do a Russian accent for these ones?
If you can pull it off, Andy, I'm sure you can. So yeah, I mean, go for it. Yeah.
What about
So who are the Russians then?
Okay, so really this is a dialogue between Stalgrave, who is the premier of Zarya in Sons of Chania, and he is the antagonist, the leader of the enemy force. And then this is also involves the general, Morgard. And Morgard is, a very no-nonsense, taken by the reins kind of general who just suffered a devastating loss. So that's something just to, kind of keep in mind.
All right, then I'll read Stalgrave. He's sort of like a Stalin-esque character, right?
He is, definitely.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
How about I do the narrator this time?
All right, perfect.
Okay, great. I'll do Morgard then.
Awesome.
Now, to any Russians who are listening to this, I apologize in advance. But I have fun doing these accents, and that's why we started the podcast. So if I suck, you'll have to forgive me.
Right.
I didn't know you had a Russian accent. I knew about the...
I can do a lot of accents. I don't do them all great, but Russian is one that I have some familiarity with, so I will try not to suck too badly.
Okay. Whenever you're ready.
Is he alone?
Stalgrave asked. The touchdown nodded in unison.
Good. You may continue to wait outside.
The Toshtal exchanged looks with one another. There was doubt behind their eyes, as there should have been, but none of the six dared to question the Premier's order. Two of the Toshtal opened the doors to the office. As Stalgrave strode inside, he found the Commander General seated in the chair behind his desk.
I see you have made yourself at home,
Stalgrave said pointedly. His vodka bottle, always full first thing in the morning, sat half empty on the desk. Morgard, for his part, was wearing his heart on his sleeve. Although his staff had provided the general with a crisp, fresh uniform, Morgard sat in a beige peasant's shirt and black woolen trousers. His collar was rimmed brown with sweat, as though he hadn't ridden 100 miles. As though he had ridden 100 miles without stopping. His beard was unkempt, as was his hair, through which he ran his calloused fingers again and again.
Did you enjoy your lunch?
The general asked.
As a matter of fact, I did. And you?
Morgard looked across the room where a tray of sliced beef, pickled cabbage, and a loaf of rye bread sat untouched.
You're early,
the Premier continued.
I find that I ride much faster without an entire army weighing me down.
I will consider that next time I assign you a mission.
Morgard picked up the vodka bottle and threw it across the room. It shattered against the marble pillar, its crystal remnants scattering everywhere. The Tashtal entered immediately, their sabers and pistols drawn.
Halt!
Stalgrave commanded. He stared down at his general, hoping for calm.
Halt!
Morgard exclaimed.
Why? I failed. I was defeated. Defeated! You flailed men for speaking out of sorts. I deserve no less than death. These men know it. The whole Crimson Citadel knows it. So get on with it already.
No more soldiers will die due to your folly. Not even you.
Stalgrave turned to the Tostal.
You may go.
The 6 guards complied, albeit reluctantly. When the doors had closed once again, Stalgrave gave his full attention to Morgard.
I would like my chair back.
Morgard came around the desk as Stalgrave took his seat. The Premier, is it Premier?
Yes.
Okay. The Premier motioned to the chair across from him, but the general was not interested. Rather, he paced the room, sputtering all sorts of nonsense about the Battle of Osley.
They were equipped well. Not at first, but all of a sudden, they played me for a fool, like some green recruit, and I took the bait. But how was I to know? My scouts had paved the way. My strategy was flawless. Flawless. Especially considering I was fighting field peasants and fishermen. Or so I thought. But they banded together behind their walls. I broke through their barricades, right up to their gate. Their doors were blasted through and burnt. My men were about to storm. Then the cannon fire came. Against my own men. They ambushed my artillerymen and turned my cannons on my cavalry. We were fodder for them. Fodder. Then we formed a line for a counterattack. But they had heavy cavalry. Heavy cavalry? They broke through our infantry lines. It was chaos. And that Chinean, that horseman, he slaughtered dozens. No lance could pierce him. No bullet could bleed him.
Our Morok has a tendency to protect the man in that way.
Stalgrave interrupted. Morgard's ranting was starting to bore him. He had already heard these accounts before, as the general had been interviewed in Novgorod a week earlier. It was there that the general had stumbled in one cold, rainy morning, starved and dehydrated. He had escaped the massacre at Osley and crossed back over the green. At the base camp on the other side of the river, he had found a crude map cartographers had drafted of their haphazard route and used it to cross the sacred plains and frontier. Death had somehow spared him, although if Morgard counted himself fortunate, he certainly was not showing it.
No, you don't understand. The man was without a breastplate. He was shot and struck. My own horse rode over him, and I stabbed him over and again. He did not bleed, nor was he injured. He continued to fight. He could not be killed.
Really?
Stalgrave stroked his beard, suddenly interested. He rose from his seat to circle his desk and approached the general.
What do you make of this man?
I do not know. Maybe he was a mercenary from a far-off land, or one of those Chinean sages or prophets taught how to fight. A demon, perhaps?
Now you sound like old men, talking of tales no one believes anymore. This warrior you speak of is probably no one of concern.
But he could not be killed.
If he was flesh and bone, he can be killed. All men can be killed, even those who cannot bleed. He can be poisoned, drowned, crushed. All men can be killed, comrade.
Do not call me comrade.
Morgard said as he ground his teeth.
If you insist on keeping me alive for whatever ruse you have planned, then I am to be addressed for what I still am, the Commander General of the Zarian Guard.
Rage slammed his fist into Morgard's jaw. The general did not fall, nor did he reach for his face. There was no blood. His head only turned. Stalgrave, his fist still clenched, stood in front of him, his eyes wide and his teeth bare. When Morgard faced the Premier, he did not appear angry nor hurt. His face was not bruised. The only difference in his appearance was his eye. Those gray eyes, suddenly cold and reserved, in a way Stalgrave had never seen before.
It is good to have you back, Commander General.
Morgard nodded.
The past has happened, marked by minor setback. Yet Zarya will move forward. Our future is still certain.
Yes, my Premier.
I have something to show you. Actually, 3 things. End of scene.
Wow, Andy, that was an amazing Russian accent. And I can
Thank
see
you.
why you're a Toastmaster, Josh.
Thanks. It's
You like you would actually.
it's speaking into a webcam and a little microphone than it is to an audience. So hopefully that just gave you a hint, a little taste of what it is to be a Toastmaster. Yeah.
Well, I saw that you would actually look into the camera every time you read something, so that was interesting.
Yeah, that is like next level live reading, Josh. Well done.
That is.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Stevie. Appreciate it. You know, it's always fun to read it aloud.
Yeah.
It really is. It's my favorite part of this whole podcast. I mean, like I say all the time, that is the entire reason that I said, "Hey, yeah, Stevie, let's do this." He wanted to do it, you know, for the marketing and business side of things. I just like to have fun with my accents and get to showcase them. My family, my girlfriend and my kids, they kind of roll their eyes. One of my daughters, she laughs at my German accent, but so a prophet's unappreciated in his own hometown. I finally get to show it off to the world.
That's true. Yeah, especially for us writers. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are way over time.
Yeah.
I'm going to interrupt you there, Stevie, because you're going to say the same thing I did. Josh, why don't you tell people where they can find you and any important news about your new stuff or upcoming stuff that we need to know?
Oh, yeah. So I do have a Facebook page. So, you know, it's facebook.com/Sons of Chania. And of course, I'm on Amazon. I have an author page for both Sons of Chania and Ashes. And, Twitter, author with capital A, JKR, my initials. And Chania, I know this is, something that people struggle to say and probably spell. It's spelled Chenia. So Sons of Chania. So if you Facebook that or look through Amazon, that's how you'll find it. My other work, Ashes, is spelled the way it sounds. And certainly I'm going to be, hopefully, and I think, Andy, I've hinted at this a little bit in our Facebook posts and everything. By this time next year, I'll have not 1, but 2 more titles out in the fantasy genre.
Very cool.
Very nice.
We're definitely going to need to have you back when you've got your next thing out. Whenever that is, just let me know so we can have you back and we can do another live reading. And hopefully you'll be able to, to be here from the beginning now that you figured out how to make it work.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Hopefully Google will be a little bit more accepting next time, a little bit, but technical issues notwithstanding, it was certainly fun. And, talking with you, Stevie, with you, Andy, of course, always a pleasure. And I can't wait to do it again.
All right, Stevie,
well, thank you so much. Yes.
All
right, guys. Well, thank you very much for watching another awesome, fantastical episode of the Fantasy Fiends podcast, episode 13. We want to give Josh a big thanks for being on the show. We're definitely going to have him next time once his next book is out, and hopefully Google will allow him to join us for the whole podcast, and we can hear more from him. But still, it turned out to be an awesome podcast. Great excerpt. I actually stopped doing my narration part because I was intrigued in the story, so that's a good sign. But all right, guys, that's it for Fantasy Fiends podcast. Tune in next week where we will have the guest author
Daniel Olson. Now I'm hoping that he's Australian. I believe I remember talking to him and saying, oh, we got to figure out the time because he's in Australia. If he's not Australian, Daniel, I apologize in advance, but I'm really looking forward to having you on anyway. So we are going to be talking. Do you remember what our topic for next week is, Stevie?
Oh, don't do that to me, Andy. No, don't do it.
Okay, no, we are going to be talking about getting into fantasy beyond medieval Europe. Most fantasy is French or British or Germanic. They've got those fields, but then getting into things like the Ottoman Empire or Africa or Asia, things like getting outside of the medieval Europe fantasy settings and not just doing it to be exotic, but to actually delve into these historical cultures because they are absolutely fascinating.
Well, Sons of Chechnya would have been a really good book to talk about this topic as well.
I know that Russian Slavic setting was super awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Josh.
All right, guys.
All right, thanks, Andy. Appreciate it.